Hello and welcome to another episode of Roll for Origin, Super's TTRPG History. My name is Lowell, pronouns he, him, and I'm joined by Mad J.
Pronouns he, him.
We are talking about various Super's games. We don't do things chronologically, and in fact, we're jumping forward quite a bit. This was my pick because I think this is a really interesting game because it represents, after the D20 boom, a lot of people going for very different kinds of Supers games. And so today we are talking about Base Raiders, which is something I've run and read through, and we're going to talk about this. So Base Raiders itself is a standalone high concept superhero game that came out in 2013, written by Ross Payton and came out from his Slang Design studio. So it uses a version of Fate, which is called Strange Fate, and that had previously been used in the Fate adaptation for Kerberos Club, which was a Victorian Supers game originally for Wild Talents. The pitch line for Base Raiders is superpowered dungeon crawling, which I love. And that sold me as soon as I saw that back in 2013. How we actually get to that is really interesting. It has a kind of brilliant sleight of hand. So to start, Base Raiders presents a classic, extensive history superhero world. There's involvement in world wars, there's mutants, magic, mega villains, tension between humanity and supers, hero organizations, alien invasions, alternate dimension incursions, all of that classic stuff. It's a big, long history. But the game we're actually playing begins by wiping out nearly all of the supers in existence. It's so good. So in this world, there's an event called Ragnarok, and there's this mysterious space object that appears in orbit, and then it essentially vanishes along with all of the supers. So like nearly every significantly powered super being, natural, magic, tech, or otherwise, vanishes from the Earth over the course of this day. And that leaves behind a world in chaos. So the game itself takes up a year after that. People are still afraid, but organizations, criminal, government, corporate, they've moved to fill the vacuum and take advantage of the super's near total absence. So near total is important because, of course, we have to have room for the PCs, but we've also got NPCs. We've got still remaining low-powered characters, aliens, sidekicks. There's just a little fragmented bit of the superhero dome left behind. You yourself are B-list survivors or newly minted super beings emerging into this world. So that setup itself offers several frameworks. So they all really nicely build on the rich backstory that the book offers. There's a lot of detail, like it's a fully fleshed out world that it blows away. The titular and key concept is the idea of our protagonists, our PCs, tracking down lost supers bases, heroes, villains, or otherwise, and raiding them essentially in a dungeon crawl. The book has lots of rules for that, for research, for rivals, for designing bases, loot, etc. We'll come back to what that looks like. But you can have several different campaign frames within that. It depends on the purpose of doing these raids. Your characters might be mercenaries. They might be trying to sell salvage for money. They might be DIY supers who are trying to gain more or stronger powers. They might be trying to keep things out of the hands of nefarious forces. They might be trying to stop evil corporations. Or, at base, they might be trying to figure out what happened with Ragnarok. Maybe find a way to bring the heroes back. The book itself is split roughly into three parts. We've got that first 90 pages of the book that lays out that history, premise, when organizations operate in the world, and about the culture that's present of base rating, what that means. The next 100 plus pages cover the rules, character creation, conflict, loot, and exploration. And then the little bit that's left is some sample characters, and then there is a fully described dungeon crawl. There's a fully described starters superhero base that's out there. So that's what Base Raiders is.
Gaming history wise, Base Raiders comes at a kind of odd time for superhero RPGs. By 2012, Mutants and Masterminds had become the only conventional, trad, big-name supers RPG really left standing with broader appeal to new audiences. Champions continued on and had traction in older groups, but didn't get nearly the attention of Green Ronin's release. It would release a third edition and DC Adventures that year, which is the edition still currently in play. Savage World Supers, as a module of a larger generic system, got some attention, primarily via Necessary Evil, which I loved, but didn't move too much past that. An even narrower niche would be Wild Talents, which we'll be talking about soon. At the time, bigger budget, higher concept games like Mutant City Blues, Scion, Kerberos Club, Smallville kind of set the stage for games like this. Superhero games with a strong hook, which made it different from more conventional or generic supers tabletop RPGs, but done as a complete game. In terms of tone and vibe, it definitely has something of the feel of Necessary Evil, i.e. a kind of post-Heroes world. Base Raiders uses Strange Fate, created for Kerberos Club. This iteration predates Fate Core and offers a complicated architecture, more like Legends of Angler, the Dresden Files, or even Strands of Fate. It isn't a super trad or complex system, but it does have a lot of moving parts and a much more involved power skill construction system than anything from Fate Core. Ironically, the Fate Core Kickstarter started in December of 2012, while Base Raiders launched in October of 2012. I might be belaboring the point, but the Fate Core Kickstarter is important in several ways to gaming and indie gaming especially. First, at the time, it was one of the biggest indie success stories. So successful, it got some backlash from bad actors in the tabletop RPG community. Second, it showcases a large-scale success of a non-OGL universal game with a new approach to community development and access. Third, it provided solid synthesis and slimming down of the Fate architecture into something both universal and modular. Finally, like a lot of the other high-concept, standalone super tabletop role-playing games of the era, Base Raiders got little support. Slang Design released one module, Boiling Point, which clocks in at a hefty 88 pages. Tales from the Underground, an 89-page collection of PDF supplements, and a handful of uncollected small PDFs. Otherwise, Base Raiders faded out soon after. Payton released a couple of adaptations for other systems, but these are very bare bones.
So this is 2012, 2013.
Right.
In terms of the media and comics history, Base Raiders comes out into a comics world that is oversaturated with events. We have a ton of big books and series with world-shaking premises that change, air quotes, everything, but actually just restore the status quo with a few characters added and a few killed off. And it feels like these big world-shaking event series, particularly, I think, Age of Apocalypse and Civil War, have an impact here. So they kind of open up, I think, designers and writers to a very radically different approach to a superhero world. Not just, we'd had Grim and Gritty, we'd had Iron Age Extreme. We have these stories that completely shake things up. By far, the biggest touchstone here is probably the original Secret Wars and the Heroes Reborn events from Marvel, which centered on characters vanishing, though those books focused on more where the characters went and what happened in the world while they were gone, but you still got that premise of all the supers leaving.
Right.
There would be some series run in parallel to Secret Wars and Heroes Reborn that kind of covered that and dealt with the absence, but not much made of it. The other thing that I can think of is Bill Willingham did a series called Pantheon, started in 1988, and that ends with most of the super beings being teleported to another world, primarily as a reason and a means for the government to get rid of them. It's a wild, wild ending. Base Raiders also has a little bit of the vibe of Kingdom Come. There we have another kind of board wipe and a new generation of heroes and that kind of focus on younger heroes kind of taking up in places. That's, of course, predated by other similar series like Watchmen and Dark Knight. I would also say back on Marvel's side, the 1992 Marvel 2099 series is another possible source or echo. We have a future cyberpunk dystopia, and again, all the heroes have vanished, but they're now reappearing. We've got them appearing in that 2099 setting.
That was a weird setting.
Yeah, it's wild. It's interesting to see them bring some of that stuff back.
Right. I was surprised.
Yeah. Marvel Legendary just did a 2099 set
Yeah.
for the board game. One of the interesting things is that this revised world for Base Raiders doesn't lean into realism, which is like something we would see in these other reboots, like the Ultimate Universe, and
Hmm.
then when they did the new version of the new universe from Marvel. Base Raiders feels closer to Stormwatch or the Authority, which
Okay.
still tries to keep it a little more grounded, but it's still fantastic. Like it's still over the top, it's still wild, but it tries to take it seriously. And, I've mentioned there a number of the Warren Ellis books. The other book from him that I think there's some echo here in Base Raiders is Planetary,
Okay.
because there is this idea of there is a secret history, there are strange machinations behind the scenes, and we are doing archaeology. We're excavating, we're dragging things out, we're finding that out, and there's some bad actors and things. And I think that could be a very interesting vibe if you leaned into that for Base Raiders.
I really dug Planetary. And so when you say that, that gets my brain going. So I totally missed Base Raiders. I didn't pick it up. I didn't play it. The superheroes plus dungeon crawling thing is too much. But
Hmm.
now that we're talking, right? I'm like, wait a minute, maybe that's all right. Maybe I missed something here.
Yeah, there's a lot of bits of this concept and its execution that I think are absolutely dynamite. Like I keep coming back to thinking, how do I adapt another system to this? How
Hmm.
do I adjust and so on? And kind of trying to work that out in my head. And so part of that starts from the fact, and we mentioned that this comes out at the same time as Fate Core.
Hmm.
And so it uses Strange Fate, which I've mentioned that a couple of times. And this was originally created for Kerberos Club, but the version of that, I think there was a Savage Worlds version and a Wild Talents version of this Victorian Supers game.
Right.
And that one was a standalone and it radically reimagined Fate. And Mike Olson wrote
Mm,
that.
yeah. Okay.
And some of the DNA from that would eventually go into Atomic Robo later, but it is much heavier. It is like Strange Fate is a lot. And one of the things that bugs me is that it pretty much wholesale uses Strange Fate, but it only mentions that Kerberos Club thing like twice, once at the beginning in just the OGL thing and once at the end. It feels to me like, hey, maybe you should have said thanks, Mike Olson, for writing this big set of rules that you're using. I know it's Creative Commons and all that, but it just kind of bugged me. I ran this
Okay.
when it like maybe it was one of the earliest things I ran online. And even even using the character templates that were in the book and the sort of the ones that I could adapt from Kerberos Club, making up characters for this was a lot. It was harder than making up a champions character for me. Like
Wow.
like the way that it has the skills and the trappings and how it defines things just are not the way I think about things. Just not at all. And so that actually became the hurdle. Like it took me a long time to get the sort of pre-gen characters together for the players. Once we got to the table, it's fate. Like
Okay.
it's fate. They have a thing with scale where a little bit like how hashtag iHunt uses it, where you get like an extra die in there sometimes
Okay.
in place of one of the things. And but it does have some real difference in terms of feel of that. So that's me kind of going on about that. Your impressions when you read through, what do you like from here? What do you think of it?
Yeah, so for starters, I'm a cranky person about my supers. And if I'm going to play, I'll read the Teen Titans, but I don't want to play Young Supers, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just could not get my head around dungeon crawling supers. Even if you say it's dungeon crawling, but it's, old bases. But then as we're talking, there's a secret history, it sounds like. There's some history where did all those supers go? And now my brain is in that necessary evil space, right? Which I loved, right? It kind of turned or flipped the whole, they're still supers, but here's a different premise. So now if everyone's doing archaeology, digging up old bases, trying to track down where villains, unaffiliated, heroes, whatever, right? Wherever they lived and whatever laboratories they have left, for whatever reason, that's a way different thing in my head. It might still be dungeon crawling underneath, but my brain goes to a very different space at that point. And I dig that. I like that premise.
I think the backstory is really well written in here. Payton made the point that the reason he did this was he wanted to run a superheroes campaign for his group, and he wanted to figure out how to make them have important characters that were kind of new and had space in the world, but without getting rid of all of the classic, like, hey, there's a bunch of weird superhero backstory and background and stuff. Like by taking all of those existing heroes off the table, we give them that room, but now we can still talk about that history. There can still be evidence of them. There can still be pieces there, and I think that's really smart. One of the other nice things I'll say is there, as I said, it's 90 pages of backstory and setup at the beginning, and
Wow.
that normally would make me a little nervous because my immediate thing is, okay, how do I convey that to the players? How much do I need to? But I think that there are a lot of pieces there, but you don't need to use all of them at all. And you can condense it down. You can do some collaborative building with the players, based on that. The basic premise is it's a classic supers world, long history, nearly all the super beings vanish. That leaves chaos for different groups of great powers.
Right.
Your people trying to excavate these bases for a reason that we're going to figure out. Like, just that pitch, I think, is enough. And I can almost imagine doing this as resetting the table after you've run a lot of a supers world. It
Right.
doesn't necessarily go, okay, that history doesn't matter anymore. The heroes are off the table. They might come back, but it provides a really interesting reset in there.
No, I agree. I agree. I like that. And I think with the 90 pages of backstory, I think you're right. I think your thoughts about the back history, the 90 pages of back history, I agree with you. I think you could jump in almost with nothing and go back and pull out from that 90 pages of history whatever you need whenever you need it.
Yeah.
And so then I dig that because if I come up short or I need something to riff off of, I've got that 90 pages of material I can work with instead of that, like you said, having to be something I got to front load to everybody.
And I think that the other nice thing is that while it is dungeon crawling base rating in the actual sort of presentation, that's like the end goal. And there is a lot of lead up to that because there's this idea that you have to figure out where these bases are.
Okay.
And you've got to navigate the fact that these bases are out there hidden, that there are other people looking for them, that there's a network of people selling this information, and that you've got this interesting sort of social thing going on there of maybe you're shadowing other people that are hunters, maybe you're, watching bad guys. Like there's a lot of that provides some really interesting stuff, especially if maybe your characters are like they've got the very basic powers and they really do want to get like a boosted super soldier serum or
Right, right.
whatnot. And there is the discussion of that underground network. And then sort of after rating, like, how do you deal with that stuff? How do you fence that stuff? How do you put it in the right place? How do you keep yourself from getting spotted? Can you go back to the base again? There's a lot of really interesting play questions, I think, that go on there as well.
That's fantastic. I like that. It's like an economy happening there around these bases. I have to find them. I gotta figure out how to get in, get out. Yeah, and like you said, how to fence that stuff off. There's another game, it escapes me now, where there's an economy system kind of like that, where the players are playing around, but you've got all these little pieces that happen before and after the raiding part. And I dig that.
I would say a game that actually it's more tense and more logistics than this, but Red Markets.
That's it, yes.
Yeah, which I have played. Have you played that?
I have, yes. Yes,
Oh
yes, yes.
my God.
I have. I haven't picked it up. I want to. I'd like to play some more of that, or I'd like to run some of that. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
It's nice.
Apparently the second edition is even stronger, but still keeps a lot of the detail of that. And for those of you at home, that's a zombie RPG with a very strong economic focus. Like you've got to track your equipment. You've got to decide if you're going out to explore to get stuff, is this worth it? And when you come back, you've got to figure out about selling it. You've got to, pay for your cost. Like you have a set of upkeep costs, and if you don't make enough on a raid with the zombie thing, and then you're in trouble. And this isn't quite that, but I think you could borrow some of those elements from that.
Are there mechanics in Base Raiders for looting, salvage, building things, doing stuff with the stuff you leave the base with?
Yeah, so there is a system, and so I'm going to go on at length here because this is one of the ones I'm still not sure about. So it's one of the places where I think we get that collision of story games and indie games. Raiders has a salvage system. When you go into the base and you go to loot it, loot is measured in loot points and bulk. And loot points convert into skill points at a 10-to-1 ratio. So the idea is that loot points can be eventually used to upgrade your character, but they don't do that flat. You have to exchange that first on the market at a not great ratio, like 5-to-1. So meaning to get one skill point, you need 50 points of loot. And we've got different types of loot. They mentioned that in there that have different weights and numbers. So like tech supplies might have 20 bulk for one salvage point. So meaning that to get one skill point, you need 1,000 bulk worth of tech supplies.
Wow.
And characters can normally only carry about 20 bulk before becoming encumbered. So it's simplified, it's abstracted, but it's a crazy. I don't think the numbers add up. I've said this before. I think economies in a game are the hardest thing to get right.
Right.
And I love the idea of different kinds of loot. I love the idea we have some kind of limits, that there's a market. Like all of that feels like a really fruitful mini game. Like that would be fun, especially if it can be done kind of between sessions. Like I'm playing Band of Blades now, and there's that kind of between session figuring out about stuff. So I think there's some stuff there, but I'm not sure Fate is the game to do that with. I think even in this slightly more granular Strange Fate version, I'm not sure Fate is the game to do a crunchy economic sim.
Right.
So I'm torn. I want to find a way to do this, but I also, my tendency is to lean towards more story gaming things. So I'm thinking about how you manage that. And I don't know yet. Like, I think I need to look at some of the games that do dungeon crawls and see how they handle treasure and loot in a story game. We got Dungeon World Second Edition. I have no idea how it's handling it, but that's just one of the things I'm thinking about. How much dungeon crawly stuff have you done in like the last 5 or 10 years?
Maybe a lot.
Maybe a lot.
Yeah, maybe a lot. So I've been running maybe close to a year, the One Ring. And I've been running in Moria, and I've been running it West Marches style. So folks are running through Moria, kind of dungeon crawling. Now, that might be in that gray zone because it's not OSE dungeon crawling where we're actually walking through 10-foot squares and that kind of thing. It's more of a point crawl than a dungeon crawl. Torchbearer It's the other game I've
Oh
been
my
playing a lot
God,
of.
Torchbearer.
Yeah. And so
Yeah, let's go on. Let's talk logistics. Yeah. Okay.
but in that game, right, from the ground up, it's built to
Mm-hmm.
handle that stuff. It's built into the character advancement. So my thought here, I would probably go look at what is the normal Fate character advancement look like? What do they lay out for Base Raiders? And can I move the loot salvage rules back to that direction, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. My thought is, I'm with you. This is too granular for Fate to carry it.
Yeah.
But I think it's solvable using Fate sensibilities.
It is one of those things where I think that one of the things we've seen in recent years is a different approach to dungeon crawling. Like there's still, as you say, the torchbearer, there's still very much the like got granted, but we have moved to point crawls and we've moved to more abstractions.
Right.
And I would be really interested to see what another take on this would be that did that from that approach. Either said, okay, when you go into a base, it's a 5-room dungeon. And here's how you generate that. Here's how you do it, rather than like the example dungeons that are provided in the book and in Boiling Point are like full 5-level maps and discussions of how you get from point A to point B and all like it's a full thing. I would love to see some mechanics for setting that up, for building those dungeons in a way that just hits the highlights.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, there's another way to do it that's even more abstracted. The way that the Into Labyrinth move that Jason made up for Dungeon World, I think is a great move. A lot of people have done interesting things with that. If you want to go fully abstract, Tomb Raider has done some really interesting things on how you explore a dungeon and have both events and puzzles in a dungeon as you
Okay.
go into the tombs.
Okay.
I've read a bunch of that, and it's no longer going to be Tomb Raider, but they better publish it as something else because it is fucking great. And I've already stolen it several times for other games, how they handle puzzles and narrative and things. So I really
Nice.
want to see that. I think that would be great. Like I would really like to see that, or a more torchbearer approach that really did go hard line.
Right.
But I don't think you need to go, 10 points of loot converts into 1 point of this
Right.
and stuff.
Right.
Like have some stuff and have some interesting pick lists. Here's the other thing. I do love the idea that there are different kinds of loot, that
Right.
there is tech loot, that there is bio stuff, that there is information. I think that's super cool.
I agree.
Like colors of mana. I like anything that breaks stuff up into to different flavors like that. It was really good.
I think, is it Fragged Empires?
Oh
They
yeah.
have some type of, I'm fuzzy, a building type of mechanism where part of your loot could be different resources is what it was.
Oh,
And
I'll have to look
they
at
have,
that.
yeah, they have different types, but each resource, if I remember it right, has a build point value, and you can use those to construct other things. But you have different types of these resources, like different types of salvage. And it might
Oh.
be simpler than this.
I love the idea that there'd be a spectrum, like a cross table. Like
Right.
it's easier to use tech salvage to do a tech thing, but tech salvage isn't as good for doing like a supernatural thing. Like
Right.
I'd love like a
That would be
proximity
great.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that way you could use all the resources or all the salvage potentially, but some are more efficient than others.
Like, let me ask you this. How often do you do high concept supers? Like Lifted has a little bit of that, at least the scenario that you ran for us and some of the things.
Hmm.
But how often do you think you do that? How often do you go more straight supers these days?
I think I'm somewhere in between, right? I don't do straight supers because I feel like that's bringing everything in. You get Doctor Strange, you get the Avengers, you get all the Iron Man tech stuff, you get these mutants, and I think it's too much for, unless you're playing Cortex, for a table session, right? I want to focus it down a little bit more, even tighter than we're the Avengers. I feel like we're X-Men is tighter than
Yeah.
we're the Avengers, right? And so I think the last high concept stuff I did was probably the Dead President stuff. Before that was Necessary Evil, and I ran that into the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe The Authority, but that's
Okay.
straight out of the book, right?
Yeah.
And that was that, yeah.
The other one, and is one I want to talk about later, is Rotted Capes, is another
Hmm.
kind of high concept one that I think is really good. Um,
Maybe Godlike, maybe Wild
yeah,
Talents, right? Because they're right, they're very
yeah.
specific. Yeah,
I think well, Wild Talent's less, but Godlike definitely. Like
right,
it
right.
definitely has that vibe. One of the things I want to talk about with this is that I really like that I think is worth
Hmm.
borrowing or at least looking at that's presented in Base Raiders, and I think it's really good, is the game has a base building process when you're going to go and investigate a base with a hypothesis system. And this reminds me a little bit of Carve from Brindlewood.
Okay,
So the GM comes in with some ideas, like some very general ideas, but the players collaboratively create the base and decide what they want to investigate, what they want to do. So each base has 7 features. That's location, the builder and owner of it, its purpose, inhabitants, contents, defenses, and history. And because it's fate, each of those elements is going to have an aspect associated with it.
nice.
So we start with the players investigating, essentially establishing what kind of thing they're looking for. Like is it in a particular region? Is it created by a particular kind of villain? They state an aspect for that element. And they start with that. So they get to set that. And then the GM chooses another one of those 7 elements and creates an aspect and thinks about the connection. So the players begin, this is what they know. They know these 2 aspects. And at that point, they can decide to go in or they can continue to investigate. So if they just go in, then they don't know anymore. The GM gets to decide everything else. So if they decide to investigate, the players can come up with a hypothesis about what another element's aspect is based on what they know so far. The GM will assign difficulty to that investigation, and then all the players roll against it.
Okay.
And then, depending on the number of players who succeed, they can be right, they can be mostly right, they can be mostly incorrect, or they can be incorrect, with the GM defining the aspect based on it. So that would give us a third. The GM then creates a rumor aspect for the fourth, and then each player can create an additional rumor, and then you roll to see whose rumor, which player gets to choose if their rumor is correct or incorrect, or if somebody else's is, and you can continue that sequence. Like so, you could get all 7 on the table, and I think that's really cool. Like I think
That is very
that's
cool. I like that.
yeah, especially if you decompress it and there's some time to, RP out doing the investigation. Who are your contacts? Who are you hitting up? What
Right.
does that network of people look like? I think that's really cool.
That is very cool. And I think you're right. You could resolve that pretty quick, right? Or you could make a whole session out of one of those. I think it scales nicely either way. Yeah, I like
Yeah.
that.
Did you read about the build a base thing? I should probably explain this. So this is a concept I kind of love for how dumb it is, but how great it is for the game. One of the conceits in the game is that at some point a super tech person came up with this thing called Build a Base. And basically it's a box that you can program and set it down and it will dig into the earth and it will use the existing materials with various nanotech and things like that. And based
Right,
on how
right.
you programmed it, it will create the base in the area. And the first of those were very primitive, but as it went along, they got better at it and could do like supernatural stuff. That's why there are so many bases. It's a great conceit. It's why they can be in weird places,
Right, right.
why people hadn't noticed them, but there'll be maybe some signs, that you can pick up about transport and things like that, going, coming and going. So that's a great thing to steal. I love
That
that.
is, but now you're left with who made that tech? Where'd that tech come from? And why? Why do we
Abs-
have it? Right?
Absolutely. And there's some justification in the book
Okay, okay.
on which super did it, and because there is a bit of the super's background in Base Raiders that has to kind of go, okay, all the supers had to kind of come to an accord so that nothing
Right,
blew up, kind of thing, which I'm always a little that
right,
I'm never certain about that. But I love that idea, and maybe it isn't like everybody had them, but enough of them out there.
right, right.
I love that.
Because you said you've ran this, how'd your games go?
So I've run it, and particularly the base that's at the back, 3 different times. And the first time I ran it with the Strange Fate, and that was a lot of work at the start to get those characters together. And then we played it, and it was just as Fate Core was coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And so the people were used to Fate Core, and it's very different in terms of its scale and power and things
Okay,
like that. And people were like, ooh, a little uncertain about that.
okay.
But I mean, they loved the idea and they
Right.
enjoyed going in. There's like a zombie villain that's trapped in the base, and so they have to deal with that, which I love. So
Right.
I did it with, gosh, I did it with we had a homebrew that I did called Action Cards, where everybody had like a card deck that
Okay.
was sort of a little bit drawn on fate and some other things, and I ran that with this scenario. And people enjoyed that, because it was kind of dumb fun. But again, it was very much just doing the dungeon crawl and not the stuff outside, which
Okay.
I like. I really want to know what that's like. And then I did like a two-shot with Fate Core, trying out if I could use Venture City Stories
Right.
with it. And the supers part worked. I couldn't figure out how to get the loot part to work particularly well. So,
Right.
I mean, it is it is a little bit one of my white whales for figuring out how to do it, A, with a super system that I like. Like, don't get me wrong, I really like Fate. I like Fate a lot more than most people in Open Hearth. And I'm probably the person in the community that's run the most Fate on the
Uh-huh.
calendar. But like, I want a little more detail. I want a little more crunch in that. And that means going to look at, mutants and masterminds,
Right.
or, wild talents, or breaking down like building a whole PBTA kind of thing. They're doing it that way. So,
Right. I think I'm with you because as we talk about this, my brain goes to what that premise is too good to just let it go. What other system do you move it in? But I think the problem is the same no matter the system. You're looking at how do I convert that loot into the character advancement mechanics without
mhm.
breaking that new system? And I don't know, right? So champions now, your A game session, everyone gets 3 hero points at the end, right?
Right.
And so what does that what does that mean when I have the loot and
Yeah.
that comes out, right?
Here's the thing I think is that there's a turn to be taken from Forge in the Dark, in that there are other things that we're going to be investing in. We're going to be investing in our characters, but we also want to build up our network of people. We also want to build up our own resources. We want to build up our crew. We want
Mm-hmm.
to secure ourselves from being detected, all those kinds of things. I think that finding a good way to build that into the game
Okay.
as a set of choices and a set of things to spend on, I think that could be really interesting
Gotcha.
to
Gotcha.
to, to
Right.
put in
Right.
there, because there is quite a bit of that, like, okay, we're going to buy these features for our clubhouse in Forts in the Dark, and
Right.
and these crew to do these things. And then actually one of the things you do then is you make a more formal kind of downtime phase. You put
Right.
some RP in there, you do that. You've got some interesting moves, things that you do. And then, okay, we found a base. Now let's go in. Let's see what happens. It's a 5-room dungeon. You hit the high points of it. You can maybe collaboratively build the theme. Yeah, I think it could work, but
No,
yeah.
I'm with you. And I love the 5 room aspect, right? Because again, that's like fractal. you can scale that down or grow that out as you need it. Yeah, I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff I love for this. It is a game, and I'm coming on a little tangent here on this one. And I mentioned this a couple of times already. Doing the Strange Fate, doing the pre-gens on that was a pain in the ass. And it's one of those things I'm constantly torn on with superhero games.
Right,
I want to run supers, but I also want players to build their characters.
right,
So my choice then is either we run simple supers like Fate or Masks, both good games,
right,
but they scratch a different itch.
right.
But if we do a more complicated game, say we're doing Champions or Wild Talents or
Hmm.
any of these like point spend games, we can't do that at the table
Right.
and play it out. So then we got to do pre-gens, and I don't know what the happy medium is on that.
I don't either. When I've done champions for, or supers in general, for like one shots and cons, I will usually make characters based off of popular ones, right?
Hmm.
You will see different variants of Wolverine in some of my games. It's not Wolverine, but you know Wolverine when you see him, and it might be called something else, but there's enough of a touchstone there that a player can pick it up and run with it. I'm not happy with that, but
Right.
right, that gets them in and ready to play. They have an idea what that character kind of is about, and they didn't make it, and we can get on with the game. But I'd rather everyone make it.
Have you tried any of these? I know there are some super games that have like theme packs that you put together a couple of theme packs and it builds a character. I think there was a system for that for Champions and maybe for Mutants and Masterminds. I've never
Yeah,
tried
yeah.
it.
I haven't either. Mutants and Masterminds, I remember. I thought they had, I believe they have one of the better package building systems that I've seen. So folks can get up and running in like 15, 20 minutes, kind of like a PBTA game.
Hmm.
But I've never actually used it at the
Yeah, I need to
table.
look at that. Anything else you want to say about Base Raiders?
No, I think I've taken some notes down. I think I'm going to chew on this a little bit
Okay. Okay.
to see where could we move it to and what does that look like.
Yeah.
I'm super interested now where I blew it off when it was out, when it
Yeah.
was making its rounds. I missed it.
Last thing I'll leave you with is something I spotted today. I saw that there is a supers system out there more recently released that's based on Dungeon Crawl Classics. And my immediate thought was, ooh, a supers funnel. What would that look like?
And I could be in. My first question is, that sounds awesome. What's the premise? Why is there a funnel in
Yeah,
game? Why is this happening? Right?
I
What is
know.
going on? Right? What kind of villain is that?
Absolutely. Well, you take that. There is that first funnel that everybody runs where they go in. You make it kind of a Willy Wonka style villain in there, and
Right?
yeah, I don't know. It just tickled me that you could do a funnel with that. So
That is crazy. That is nuts.
thank you, Jay. Listeners, that is our show. Roll for Origin is a production of the Open Hearth Gaming Community. You can find links to that, as well as links to a bunch of stuff that Jay has done and a bunch of stuff that I have done. That's all in the show notes. This is part of our going podcast network. Jay, thank you again so much.
Thanks for having me. This was great, man.
Awesome. And listeners, that's our show.